Hi, this is Karen with Karen's Cards and More. I'm so glad you joined me today. For the month of April, I am going to feature projects that use some of my favorite products from Stampin' Up! That will be retiring at the beginning of May. When we get the new catalog, there will be old products that are retiring, and so I want to feature some of my favorites. So I'm going to start with my favorite stamp set. It actually has a coordinating die, and this is my absolute favorite. If there's one set that I have used repeatedly on the retiring list that I would say, if you're only going to order one, make sure it's this one. It would be the Good Morning Magnolia set. It comes with 2 sets of stamps. You have your larger Magnolia, your smaller one, and I just love Magnolias. I think that's part of the draw to this set for me. But all the sentiments are just really good sentiments. You could do a thanks, you could do a thinking of you. Enjoy today, I've used that for birthday cards. Just a really cool set. You get this nice border image. And then you could also get the coordinating die set. It has this really cute border. You can do a 3D magnolia with that. It has the die for the images, some separate leaf images. Just a really cool set. So if you were going to ask me what's your favorite thing, stamp set, die set on the retiring list this year, this is the set. And this is the set that I would say, yeah, get a hold of that before it retires. So let's talk about the card that we're going to make today. We're going to do this card featuring a watercoloring technique, and this is new to me. I'm not an artist, so to stretch myself and do something that I'm not totally comfortable with was a stretch, but this is what we're going to do today. I love the way it turned out. I love the watercolor look. It's almost like a stained glass type look, and that's what we're going to do today. So let's look at the components of the card. So I started with a piece of Misty Moonlight cardstock, and this is 8.5 by 5.5, scored at 4 1/4. And then I have a piece of Designer Series paper, and this is from the Flowers for Every Season, which is also retiring. So if you like this, you'll definitely want to place an order for that. And this is 5 1/4 by 4. And for the watercolor panel, we're going to use the shimmer white cardstock. It's going to hold up to water better than the basic white. So I'm using that, and it's 3 3/4 by 5. And then I have a piece of the basic white that is 5 1/4 by 4. And this is for the inside of the card that you could put your sentiment on and decorate up to go on the inside. But we're going to be focusing on the outside of the card today. So let's start with our watercolor panel because we're going to need some dry time here. So let's get started. I'm going to bring in my Stamparatus because that's how I lined up my stamps. And I'm just going to put my shimmer white piece. I'm just going to line it up on these grid lines just to make sure I have it straight. And you wouldn't have to, because of the way these stamps are going on, it really wouldn't matter because you're going to decide how you want the stamps before you put them on. So let's start with that. And then when I place my stamps, I wanted to make sure to get as much of the stamp as I could, the flower. I didn't really want the stem. So I'm going to think about that as I place them. So I'm going to start with the little flower. And I'm going to figure out where I can put that in this corner to get the most of my flower and a little bit of leaf, but not get stem. So I think I like it about like that. And then for my larger stamp, remember we're going to have a sentiment towards the middle. So we want to definitely keep that in mind as we're placing the larger stamp. And I don't want to get the branch in there. I just want to get as much flower as I can. And some leaves, but I don't want to be more leaf than flower. So you could just play with it and twist it around and see what works for you. I think I like that. Okay, so then just close your lid and press on it, and that gets your stamps to stick to your Stamparatus. So now you've got your placement ready. So then we're going to take our embossing buddy, and we're just going to go over the card, because our first step is to do our gold embossing. That's going to give us the little wells that we need to do our watercolor. So we're going to start with that. And then we're going to take our Versamark ink and we're going to ink up our stamp set. And we want to make sure that all the parts that we're stamping are good and inked up. Lots of Versamark on there. I noticed that I always want to give special attention to that middle. Sometimes that's a little light, so I want to make sure to give extra attention to that. Now, one tip that you could do if your stamps have lost a little bit of their sticky and you want to make sure when you flip this that it doesn't fall on your paper, I'm going to show you a technique that you could do. And then later I'm going to talk to you about a different way to do it, which is what I did with mine. But you could definitely do this. So I've got my stamps placed where I want them, but maybe you're afraid if you flip the lid like we normally do that your stamp is going to fall off. You could always just close the back of it and press that way, and you could even hold it together and turn it over and press down, and that would keep your stamp from falling over on your paper and getting Versamark where you didn't want it. So that's just one tip of a way you could do it if you're worried that your stamp won't stick. Okay, so I'm going to pull this up. I'm going to take this out, and I'm going to bring in just a scrap of grid paper. You'll see that it's got stuff on it. I've used it plenty of times, but I'm just going to use this to do our embossing powder. And then you just want to sprinkle the gold over your Versamark, making sure to cover the image. Now, you can see I must have had some previous image on there. So I can come in with a paintbrush. I keep a little paintbrush just for this, and I can just use that to get rid of any embossing powder that I don't want. Okay? There's a little there. Okay, I think I've got rid of all of it. And so I'm just going to use my paper here and put my gold embossing powder back in the container and get that out of the way. So we're going to be using that again a little bit, but that gets it out of the way now. Another thing that you can do, I have just a little smudge, and I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but I've got a little smudge here that I don't like. So I'm just using a sand eraser, and I'm just going to give that a little bit of a erase. At the end of the day, you wouldn't see it anyway when we get done decorating, but I'm just going to erase that off. Okay, looks good. Okay. Now I'm going to just heat up. This is going to be a little loud, but I'm going to heat up my heat gun so that we can do our embossing. And I'm going to let it heat up a little bit. While that's heating up, I see a little bit of that leaf that I want to add just a little more embossing powder to before I emboss. So I'm just going to sprinkle a little right on that edge. See how that added to it? And I'm just going to take my paintbrush and get any stray. Okay. And I think that looks better. So let's emboss. Now hopefully you'll be able to see the magic happen. This is always fascinating to me to watch it. When it turns, you'll see the powder as the heat turns it shiny, and you'll know that the embossing powder is done. As soon as it gets shiny, you want to stop and go on to your next image. So I'm going to go on over to the larger image. I'm just going to make sure we get it all embossed. You'll be able to tell what's still powder because it won't have the shining look to it. So I'm just going to make sure that we got everything shiny. You can turn your paper, make sure it looks good. So I think we're done with the embossing for now. And we're not going to add the sentiment just quite yet. We're going to start with our embossing. I would always recommend that you have a paper towel, some kind of cloth nearby. And I'm just going to use a block for part of this. And then I'm going to use an aqua painter. Now, when I bought aqua painters, they came individually, but when you buy them now, they come 3 in a set. I was trying to look. I have another one somewhere that I was using, and I'm not sure what. I hid it from myself. So this is the one we're going to use today, and I'm not really going to use the water. You could, as you squeeze it, it releases water, but I'm not really going to use that today. What I found was more helpful to me was I kept a block, and I have just a squirt bottle, and I just put water on this. And then I was able to just dip into that water instead of worrying about, am I going to run out of water in my pen? So I just squirted some water on there, and then I had it. So let's talk about how I colored my images. And I'm going to start with my leaves, and we're going to start with this one, the littler image. And I'm using the Stampin' markers. Now you could definitely use your ink pad. You could put a little of the ink on here from your ink pad. You could use the re-inker liquid. You cannot use Stampin' blends. Stampin' blends will not work because they're alcohol and they won't react to the water like these will. So the Stampin' markers will work fine for this technique. So we're going to start with the green, and I'm using the Just Jade. You could use whatever green that you wanted, and I kind of went with the same process that I do if I was going to color this with my Stampin' blends. I don't know, I'm not an artist, I don't know all the shading techniques, so I just do very limited. So what I did, I used the brush tip. I'm going to turn this a little bit so hopefully you can see it better, and I just at the bottom of the leaf, and I only worked in a few areas at a time, so we're just going to focus on the leaves with this smaller one. And I put this down the vein in the middle, and I just did a little at the bottom of each leaf where it joined to the flower. Just put a little bit of color. And then I went back, I took my aqua painter and I dipped a little water, and the more water you use, the more this is going to bleed and spread. So then I just went with the water, and I would kind of say, I would term this maybe feathering it out. If you think about in those terms, that might help. But the more water you use, the more the color is going to spread. And you can always, if it spreads too much and it's too light in one area, you can always go back later after it dries and add more color. And this is where I said it stays in those wells. Now, if you can see, I have a little bit of extra liquid outside of that leaf, and I'm just going to use this, and I'm not going to spread, I'm not going to wipe, I'm just going to dab at it to get that color up. And I'm just going to go ahead and add this color. And like I said, we can always come back to this and add more green if you don't have enough green. And the more water, the more it's going to spread. Okay, so we're going to let that we're going to let that be drying, and we're going to go ahead and do our green on the larger flower. Again, using the brush tip, and I'm going to do one leaf at a time just because they're larger leaves. I started with just putting a concentration of the color where the leaf meets the flower, and then I did a strip down the middle, and you could even do these side veins like that, okay? And I'm just going to do, like I said, focus on one flower at a time, and then we're going to get a little water, and I'm just going to come this way, just kind of feathering that color. If you think of it as feathering the color, I still want the dark. Now you could, instead of applying the ink right to the image, you could do it, you could scribble on your block and then get water and go that way and layer the color. As I'm not a big watercolor person, I wanted to make sure I got concentrated color in certain places. And this is what I found worked for me. And the more water you use, the more you're going to be able to thin that out. And we can always come back and thin some more as it's drying. And you would rather do it with less of the dark detail, and that's okay too. However you want to do it. That's what's neat about when you hand make something. It's definitely your creation, so you can do whatever you want to do. And I'm coming up a little bit farther on the leaf with the dark this time, just for some variety. I'm going to go back in my water, and I'm going to feather that out. And the embossing keeps it from spreading all over your cardstock. It keeps it within the leaf. I mean, you could swipe outside the leaf and get color outside of it, but the embossing really does hold it inside. I'm just going to continue to do that. And I can already tell, see how light this is? I'm definitely going to want to add color to that in a few minutes, and I'll show you how I added color. So then I've got one more leaf that I'm going to do. I'm going to add some color. And I'm just going to turn this. It's easier for me to work this way than the other way, so I'm just going to turn that. And I'm going to do the same process. Just pulling that ink to color the different areas. Okay, now we're going to go back to the little one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in another block, and I'm just going to take that same brush tip, and I'm just going to scribble on my block a little bit. It comes off easily. So I'm just going to take a little bit of water. You could easily just squeeze the water from your aqua painter. And I'm going to come in and get some color that way. And I'm going to add color. Just like that. And I'm going to do the same with the large. I want to get a little more water. And where we put that down originally direct to the paper with the marker, that's going to leave us some of the dark highlight, which is what I wanted. If you use less water, you're going to have more intense color when you put this on your paper. So you can just figure out, you know, do you want it lighter? Do you want it darker? And just play with your colors. Okay. Get a little more water. And it's just a process. Just a process. Takes a little time. Probably more time for me because I'm newer at watercoloring. If this is old hat to you, it will probably go much quicker for you. I'm just going to slide some color in this one. Okay, I think I've got my leaf just about where I want it. I want a little more color right in there. Okay, I'm going to go with that. All right, now you want to clean out your aqua painter, so I'm just going to squeeze water and wipe until I get rid of all the green, because we're going to switch colors, so I want to make sure to get rid of that. And I'm going to go ahead and wipe the green off my block so that I'm ready to go with my blue if I end up going, and I'm sure that I will. So now let's start with the blue. And I'm going to do the same thing. At the base, I'm going to add the more intense, I want the more intense color at the base, and then I want to pull out from there. So I'm just adding color there. And then in these side petals, I'm just adding a little color at the base, because that's what I'm going to pull up from, and I want it darker at the bottoms than I do at the top. So let's go with that. And we're just going to concentrate on the smaller one first. And so I'm going to come in with a little water. And I'm just, again, going to pull that color up. And just blend that dark. And let the water pull it. And that's the neat thing. The embossing holds the water in that area that you're working on. So the color doesn't go outside of where you want it to. And that makes it really, really nice. So I'm just going to work on pulling my color. And you could go, you could make it as dark or as light as you want. As I'm doing this, I don't know if you can see it, but you can see the dark color just moving around. So you can keep dark where you want dark, and it will look different when it dries. So sometimes when I was doing this, I was looking at it as I was doing it, and I was like, oh, I don't really like that. But as it dries, it will look different. Okay, so now I'm going to come to the big flower. And I knew that I wanted to concentrate more of the dark in the middle. So I just kind of did a big circle in the middle, knowing that I'm going to pull out from there. And then I just, whenever there was a new petal, I just added a little bit of dark because I wanted to be able to pull some dark from the bottom of the petals. So in each area, I'm going to add a little bit of dark. And I'm sure there's 1,000 different ways to do this. And people that are artists probably have a much better way to do it than I do. But this is what worked for me and let me get the color that I wanted. So that's what I'm showing you today. And I'm sure as I do more watercolor, I'll find more things that I like better. But I really liked how the water does the work for me. And I don't have to be an expert painter. And I see that I want to get a little more intense color right in there. And I'm just going to work on pulling that out and letting the dark blue color the rest of it. If you used regular ink, you would have to use something that wouldn't run with the water. But the problem is, if it's not embossed, there's nothing to hold the water in the wells. So that's why I like embossing it, because it kind of gives me a little, kind of a little guide, holds my paint in. So I'm just going to keep adding this water. If you get too much water, you could always just come in with this and just, you don't want to smear, you don't want to rub, you could just dab up some liquid if you need to. Okay. So I'm just going to continue adding water and letting this color it's really relaxing. I was really scared to do it at first and thought, oh, I'm going to make a mess of this. This isn't going to turn out. But it was really relaxing just to sit here and add the water and watch the colors. So I really did enjoy it. So I'm going to continue to come with my colors. Adding my water. I'm letting it color the image. And I wanted it lighter at the ends of the petal than I did. That's why I did that concentration of color in the middle, because I wanted it to look darker in the middle. So that was by design. You may have a different way that you're doing, a different thing that you want to do. And that's totally okay. This is just how I wanted mine to look. Okay. Now you can decide where you want some additional color. If you can see, there's a little spot there that I don't like the way the distinction in the color, so I can just go back and smooth that out. Okay. And then we're gonna, as this one dries, we can add more to it wherever we need to. We can use water to just spread out what's there, or to soften it in between the dark and the light. Or we can add more color. And I think I like that. I think I'm okay with the amount. I'm sorry to get my head in the camera. I think I'm okay with the amount of color. I think I'm going to add just a little bit. So I'm going to do the same thing with this that I did with the green. I'm just going to scribble on the block a little bit. I don't need much because I'm not going to do much. I kind of like it the way it is. But I do want to add a little bit of color right here. Okay, then I'm going to come in. I just want a touch of it, so I'm going to use more water to soften it. Just feathering that in. I guess that's the best term I could think of, is to think of it like you're feathering it in. I'm just adding a little more color. Okay, I think I'm about done. I think I'm about happy with it. I see one more area that I want a little more color in. So I'm just going to get me some color just in this edge here. It's a little light. So I want to get some more of the blue color. Okay, I think I'm done. I'm going to add a little more right in here because I see a harsh line that I don't like. So I'm going to add that. Smoothing out the color. And then I think I'm done. Again, I'm going to use water to clean my aqua painter until there's no blue color. I'm going to go ahead and put the lid on this. And then I'm just going to wipe up my block, wipe up my water. That's what's nice about the blocks. They can be your paint palette as well. So I've got my color on this. I'm ready to go. Now, we did put, let me give this a chance to dry and let me show you what I was talking about. I'm going to pull one of my other stamps from the set so I can show you how I did this. Let's work with the Thinking of You. So I've used them so much, and probably it won't do it now that I want it to, but I was having trouble getting them to stick because I've used them so much. A lot of the sticky's gone. So what I did is I used my silicone mat, and I have a sponge that I keep in a sealed container so that the air can't get to it, so that it won't get hard. And you just want to take some Tombow glue, some liquid glue, and just spread it around. And so I just took a sponge, and these sponges are also on the retiring list, so if you like those, you're definitely going to want to order a couple packs of those. And so I just smoothed that around, and then I just brushed that on there. And so I went all the way around, because I just want a thin layer of coverage, and then just set that aside and let it dry. And when that dries, that'll give you new sticky on the back of your stamp to allow you to be able to hook it to your block, connect it to your block without fear of it falling. And then this just cleans up really easy off the silicone mat. So that's the way that you can make your rubber stamps re-sticky. So let's work on our sentiment. So I'm going to put my sentiment on a block. And that's another thing that you might want to do, especially if it's a stamp that you've used a lot and you want to make sure it's still sticky. Just do like that and make sure it's going to stick to your block. I'm going to try to get that on there straight. Okay. Now, we already used the embossing buddy the first time, but I didn't want to trust that that was going to be enough. So I'm going to go ahead with the embossing buddy again. Now, you don't want to go over your image that's drying. If you do that, you're going to smear it. So you want to go in between that, but I want to give it good coverage to make sure my embossing works. So just work around your images that are drying. And then I'm going to come back in with my Versamark. And this says, the journey of life is best shared with a friend. We'll get through this together. And I thought that was, anybody that's going through a rough time, that would apply. During this time of COVID, it's been a rough time, so I thought it was good for that. Just a lot of different, you could use it for a sympathy card, just a lot of different situations that would fit. So I'm just going to ink it up with my Versamark, and I'm just going to figure out where I want it in between my flowers and press it down. I always hold for a minute to give the ink a chance to bind, especially with the shimmer white. Okay. Now I'm going to come back in with my scrap paper and my gold embossing powder. And I'm going to put that on there. It looks like I need a little more just right on the edge there. Okay, looks good. So I'm going to, again, I always recommend putting your powder up while you can so you don't knock it over and lose a bunch of your powder. And this stuff does go a long way. I've used gold a lot and I still have plenty. So we're going to go ahead and get our heat gun. Now, if you are time crunched on your project and you really want to get it done, this isn't drying, your watercolor isn't drying fast enough, you could always hit that with the heat gun as well to dry that. I'm going to pick this up. Try to keep it so you can see it. It's hard to do in the camera. Keep the tool out of the camera, but allow you to see how it embosses. Okay, there we go. And we're done with our embossing. Now, the next thing I did, I'm going to, you want to make sure for this next step, the last time we used our stamps, we used them with the Versamark, and you're going to want to make sure to clean your stamp for this next part, because if you don't, you're going to transfer Versamark to your image. So I am going to, rather than, you could die cut a mask, but I found it easy to just do it this way. So I'm going to clean my stamp real good. I know that squeaking is probably like really loud on the camera. And then I'm going to come in with a rag and just dry it off. Okay. And then what I did is I just placed this down to cover my watercolor image. It's dry enough to where that's not going to smear it. And I just wanted to cover my image. It doesn't have to be on there perfect. I just wanted to make sure that my image was covered, okay, for this next step. Now, what I did is I took some of my blue and again, scribbled on my block. Now what you could do is you could keep a scrap piece of paper handy and you could practice on here. And I want to make sure I get everything in the camera. I'm going to put this right here. I think that you can see it that way. You could practice on your scrap paper to make sure if what you're doing. So I'm just going to squirt a little bit of water here on the side, and I'm going to pick up some of that blue color. And you can do it like this, or you can do it like this. I found that I got more spotting when I did it like this. And you can do it as dark or as light as you want. Now I'm going to stop and hold that up so you can see how it puts dots of color. They're not supposed to look uniform. They're not supposed to be perfect. If you don't like the bleeding look, let's try it. Let's see what happens. I'm going to move that one aside. I'm going to bring in another block where we're just going to, I'm going to clean my aqua painter. Just get some of the water out of it. We're going to try the same thing again, only I'm not going to purposely add water to it. I'm just going to get the blue with the water I already have. And we're going to try it again. And when you do that, because I didn't add water, it looks like it bleeds a little less. So that you could do it that way. Let me show you another way you could do it. I've got the Misty Moonlight re-inker. So we're just going to play. I didn't play like this when I did my card, but we're just going to play a little. So I'm going to take a little bit of the re-inker. And we just need a drop. We don't need much at all for this. And I am going to dry my brush a little bit. I'm going to clean out some of the blue. And I'm just going to dry it, and I'm not going to squeeze it to add more water. Again, coming in with my scrap paper. I'm just going to get a little bit of that. I'm going to try to stay at this end so you can see the difference. So that puts a whole different, it probably doesn't spread as much. So I think that's the way I'm going to do it on this card. You can still see it spreading some. If you used a totally dry, like a paintbrush, you wouldn't have the spreading at all. It's the water that's causing it to spread. So you might want to think about that when you're trying to decide. I didn't mind about the, but I want it to cover everything but my watercolored image. So that's why I covered it. I can always wipe it off of my stamp. And I'm just going to come in and add some spots. You can do as much or as little as you want, and I think that works for me. And then we just need to let that dry. And I'm going to clean my brush again. And I'm going to clean off my blocks. Okay. So we're about done. We're about ready to put it together. Again, we're going to let this dry a little bit. We're done with our stamps. That was just to mask them so that we could put our spots on there. So we're going to come in now. And what I did for the inside panel, I knew I wanted to write my image later. So what I did, I just came in with my Misty Moonlight, and I'm just using a leaf from that same Good Morning Magnolia set. And I'm just going to use this that we just splattered on because it's just scrap. And I just wanted to, I'm going to wipe off, I've got splatters of blue on my mat, and I just want to make sure to get that up. Okay. So I just came in with this little leaf. And I didn't want it to be full strength, so I stamped off. And then I just put a leaf, and I'm going to do that 3 times across the bottom. You could definitely do more. You could do less. And that's all I did across the bottom. That left me plenty of room to write my sentiment. So that was what I did for that. So let's move all this out of the way, and we're ready to start putting the card together. So I'm going to start by putting my inside panel on. And I'm just using my Stampin' seal. And I'm just going, if you start to try to put your Stampin' seal and it doesn't go, just use your thumb and press it up a little bit to get it started. Of course, then you're going to have it on your thumb. But that's how I find to get it started. And you're just going to come in here. I got a fuzzy in my tape. Okay. And then I'm just going to come all the way around. Okay. I'm going to bring in my card base. And I'm just going to try to line it up. Okay. And we're going to go to the front. And we're going to put our adhesive on our Designer Series paper piece. Okay. And again, we're going to, and you just want to kind of make sure you think about your border. Sometimes it's hard to see where your fold is, so you can always just fold it a little like that. You could do the whole fold. I mean, you could totally fold it and get it all ready, but I just want it to lay mostly flat, but I need to see where my fold is. So that's usually what I do, and you're just going to try to line this up. Okay. Now we're ready to come in with our panel. Now, as you can see, this might be a little warped where it's drying. You could always set that under something heavy and let it dry. And I'm going to add my adhesive. You could definitely use the liquid glue to attach this if you wanted to. I'm just going to use my Stampin' seal, and I'm going to come in with that. Okay. I'm going to bring this back. And you might find it's easier to line it up this way. Whatever way you find helps you to get it lined up. Okay, I'm going to go with that. And then I had a few of these gems here, and one side is more blue, darker blue. The other is a lighter blue, so I used those, and I'm going to get my Take Your Pick tool, and I used one of the larger ones over here, and then I came back with the smaller ones, and I put 2 of those down in here. Just like that. And then I'm going to fold this, and I'm going to come in with my bone folder, and I'm just going to go along that and make sure that it's good and creased. And since there's a lot of thickness, I'm going to come along on the back and do it again. And there we have it. Love the Good Morning Magnolia set. I hope that you'll give this a try. If you don't have this set, make sure you order it in April. You'll find that you use it over and over. Hope you've enjoyed this. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, be sure to do that below. You can hit the notification bell so that you're notified every time I upload a video. I invite you to join me on my Facebook business page. Every Monday I do Stampin' Share featuring a different card or project, so check me out there. That's going to start on Monday night at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. And if you want to order the Good Morning Magnolia set, if you want to make sure you get that before it retires, you can go to karensmith.stampinup.net and you can order it there. Hope to craft with you again soon.